So, as usual, it has been beyond eventful, building up from last week again up until this point in time. And in the middle part there, New York trip and the interactions that took place in New York. Shout out to the Lux Library for having me and for letting me dialogue about my book of poetry, Growth. And while I was actually thinking about the construct of that event and the things that I said therein, I began to think about a verse from within the scriptures because a lot of what I said at that time revolved around relationship and the beauty of scars and the revelation of journey from accepting heartbreak, from accepting loss, from accepting the things that we really do not normally want to accept when it comes to trying to understand who we are as human beings and who we are as people. And one of the verses that came to my mind was Psalm 75. Psalm 75, for promotion cometh neither from the east nor from the west. God is judge. He putteth down one and setteth up another. Forgot that verse there, but I will make a note there for that verse. And as I began to think about this verse, actually, it's probably good that that's set up that way so that as you just go in, you can actually see the verse, that point of that verse. The idea of love relationship and wanting to appear however we want to appear to our partner's eyes, as I like to convey through my poetry, it's never going to be what we want it to be, and it's never going to be as we expect it because we can't control another person's vision of us. We can't force love. And that's one of the things that stand out to me about the episode in Eden. Love could have been demanded, love could have been forced, but the art of love was not compelled. Love had to be genuine. Love was not genuinely given, but should love had been given genuinely, well, things would have been a little bit different. But I just say that just to show the character of the mind within Eden. The character of the mind within Eden was not a mind forcing love, was not a mind compelling a performance for love. It wasn't about show, it was about act, it was about action. It reminds me of in the book of Samuel, it reminds me of in the book of Proverbs, where it says, the Lord is a God of knowledge. By him actions are weighed. And so as I began to think about everything that I spoke about this past Saturday night in New York, and then the different thoughts that were brought out from what I said from last week's Justification Live, this verse, promotion cometh neither from the east nor from the west, God is judge. He putteth down one, setteth up another. In Justification, the latest episode of Justification that I gave, or that I published, had to do a lot with the sun and looking at the east and looking at what the east symbolizes. Now, in context here, I'm not going into that direction, but the east is in every direction, pretty much, in the different contexts within the scriptures, they are important. But in this context, promotion neither comes from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south. No direction is getting is able to give direction in that context. It's not literal direction, it's not literal geography. When we think about the east, there's a particular branch of religion from the east. When we think about the west, there's a particular branch of religion from the west. When we think about the north, when we think about the south, there are particular branches of religion from these things, and especially as the Bible annotates and connotes within it. Set of Psalm 75 is There is no such thing as turning to what is believed from the east. There is no such thing as turning to what is believed from the west. There is no such thing as turning to what is believed from the north or from the south. Promotion doesn't come from the source of the aspect, from the direction of which we are turning or turn. But there is one mind that judges and put down. Promotion isn't from wherever we are believing we are getting our introspection from, whether we are pulling it from the east in its philosophical aspect, whether we are pulling it from the west and its pagan, we are pulling it from the north. Again, these are all key terms in Bible language, and these are also key terms when we look at them philosophically outside of the Bible. There's no promotion. In the East, there's a way to promote yourself and to write that you would imagine the Bible to be talking about. In the West, there is a way to promote yourself in the forest of experience you would imagine the Bible to be talking about. Bible's mind in Psalm 75 is letting us know that kind of promotion isn't the kind of promotion that the scriptures are after. And as I thought about my book Growth and the foundation of love, how it is defined, each poem raising the question of, is this love or is this not love? Is this how love is supposed to be or is this not how love is supposed to be? Is there actually a forcing of affection as opposed to the thought of embracing and receiving affection, freely giving affection, or doing something in order to gain affection? And that led me to this, to the idea of promotion. And as I began to think about promoting love, I began to think about this one Bible verse. And it kind of goes along with what we have been saying for the past couple weeks about letting the conversation be, letting the conversation exist in its own character. Let the conversation kick up dust and get dirty and feel neglect and feel shame and feel remorse and feel not knowing, feeling just out of it because of where it is and where it knows it should be. Well, this is the kind of experience the Bible is wanting us to embrace. And it is this experience that made me think back to my book of poetry, to in every single one of, those poems, you can see love and you can see passion, as was the debate there, looking at the image of the book cover. But as you go through and look at each poem, you begin to question the definition of love. You begin to question the definition of how to express love and affection. You begin to question the difference between passion and love. Is there a difference between passion and love? And that's what I wanted, because that has been my experience, and to articulate that experience through the imagery of male and female, not literal, but as representing heart and mind. And it's the marriage of the two that allow the living experience to be what it is supposed to be for the individual human being. You can't script that. You can't script a relationship. It's cool to envision your partner being involved with everything you're involved with. It's cool to envision your partner having your same interest. It's cool to imagine being similar in every way possible so that then you can just love that person because you're so similar. But ultimately, you're just fantasizing about you. You might as well just be alone. You might as well just be alone. Because there's no one that's going to have your interest. There's no one that's going to have your personality. There's no one that's going to have your likes. There's no one on this planet that's going to be just as you are or just as we are. And that's the beauty about love. And that's also the beauty about the dynamic between male and female. It's the same sort of dynamic, and it's the same sort of beauty to take into consideration when it comes to the marriage of our personal devotion conversations, conscience, and the being of our human. It's the same concept. And there are things that we can do illegitimately that portray the well-being of such a marriage, which is a performance or a forced act through deeds, through rituals, through ceremonies, and through so on and so forth, to make us believe that the marriage of the two is well. Or there is an experience where the two, the conversation's conscience and the being of the human, can go through a living experience where they are in conflict with one another to understand one. The second one is how love actually is. There's no such thing as being in a relationship with another person and they're going to be what you expect them to be. There's no such thing as being in a relationship and not experiencing hardship of difference. You need hardship of difference because you need growth. It is only being with that individual specifically that you're going to learn something more about who you are. They're going to learn something more about who they are. And if you too like this experience, well, then you should definitely be together because that's the experience. Same dynamic with our conversations, conscience, and the being of our human. Be able to have time alone to grow familiar with one another. If there is no time for the conversations conscious to grow familiar with the being of our human, we do it. There's like, what are we actually doing? But then there's the aspect of a forced or compelled performance to give way to the thought or to the feeling of a wholesome or a marriage that is well between the conversation's conscience and the being of the human. And everything that I said about my book of poetry, I didn't really bring the Bible in. I did. Eventually, I confess that the foundation of my found in the book of Malachi, where it talks about the giving, acknowledging to one's spouse, and then in that section of verses down, the author of the book of Malachi revealing that one's spouse is one's spirit of mind. So, in essence, the author of the book of Malachi is advising their reader to do well by the spirit of their, specifically the spirit of their devotional mind, to do well by it, to not neglect it, to not forget it, because this should be our spouse. This should be the spouse to the being of our human. This should be the spouse to the being of our. So as our conversation is rearing, as our conversation is developing, as our conversation is growing and is the 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 transformation there is supposed to be seen not simply just within us, but within all being of our human. It is that spouse that is to guide the home of what we are as a human being. It is that spouse, the spouse of the spirit of our mind, the spouse that is the spirit of our mind, the spouse that is the spirit of the mind of our devotional conversation, that is to care for the home that is within the being of our human. And there is no performance and there is no act, there is no sort of anything that one can do to get the outcome or get to the result of what such an interaction is. Why? Because performance doesn't appear from what is given in the West, or from what is shown in the West, or from what is done in the West, or from what manifests from the West, nor from what appears, shows, or manifests from the East, or from the North, or from the South. Promotion only occurs by waiting on that judges. Promotion occurs by waiting on that judges. And this idea of waiting on, as mentioned previously, not a waiting as in lethargy, as in dormancy, waiting on as in actively attending to, waiting on as in actively attending to, as does a waiter to their table. Same context that the scripture uses there is the same context. Waiting on as if a waiter is waiting on their table. We have to wait on the mind within the scriptures. We have to wait on the mind of the words that are within the scriptures. That doesn't mean waiting on the Bible itself. That means waiting on the words. A little bit different there. Because when we're waiting on words, we are waiting on what has been sown within. We are waiting on what has been sown within, and we're exercising what has been sown within to develop a level of wisdom to wait on that. It has for more to wait on, we are continually taking in for what to exercise and also to wait on. So repeating for the growth in the conversations, thoughts, and feelings, all for the purpose of the being of our human having its spouse. And that's the idea that I wanted to convey briefly at this point in time as I reflected on this past weekend and the things that were brought out or said since last Tuesday, is that the activity of the conversation, it's never stalled. It's never dormant. The activity of the conversation is always going on. Always going on, because there has to be something done that the experience may give birth to a marriage between the conversation's conscience and the being of the human. It's, if we could just see what a physical relationship is all about and value that, well, we would be able to see what the relationship is going on within us to value that. And as I always again say, is the physical is given to us as an example, as a tool, a key, an instrument to better probe into what the private life of the devotional conversation is about. If we can see the dynamic, the conflict, the structure of a physical relationship and how imperfect it is, and how through that imperfection beauty is created, well, then we can see how the devotional conversation and the being of the human through that imperfect interaction is to form a perfect experience for that individual person. Everything is marriage. There's a lot you can say and know and hear and remember, but I like to give Bible philosophy, and as I have come by it, and as it has been, as I've studied it through the Bible, is marriage. Union between heart and mind, union between devotional conversations, conscience, and being. The marriage there is the experiment, is to give way to a living experience that is well. That's the creation. Like Creation is not finished. Creation is supposed to continue still within us, and it can only continue still within us as it's supposed to be. The art of performing creation is an art deceiving the individual human being to the experience that it's supposed to be having. The fault in forcing that experience, the fault in forcing a performance for that experience results in the individual not really experiencing the kind of growth and development that they need to. And that turns everything upside down, because Bible is about experiencing growth and development personally so that we can grow from it, not just for ourselves, but for them that then see us, them that then encounter us. A written epistle for the particular experience that our individual human being is supposed to have is to be read by individuals encountering us, whether they know us or not. However we vibe to them from wherever we are, they are to know that there is something different about our experience with ourselves personally and with the living mind that set all of this in order. And so that's that main that stood out to me is the idea of promotion. The idea of promotion and the idea of promotion as witnessed through intimate relationship. And that intimate relationship, just a hologram for the relationship that is supposed to go on within the individual human being concerning the growth and the development of their thoughts and feelings. Because nothing that is done or manifests from the East, I'm pretty sure we can guess and assume what that is, and nothing that manifests and develops from the West, I'm pretty sure that we can think about what that means. And then from the North or from the South can do anything for what is actually intended by the mind inspiring the Bible's words, which is the marriage of the conversation's conscience to the being of the human for the purpose of the individual person valuing themselves, loving themselves, and in a way that is not prideful, in a way that doesn't put themselves above themselves, even if that sounds weird, but it's out there, but in a way that magnifies the philosophy that got that individual to that point, and in doing so, magnifying the living mind of the living God that got that mind to where it is. So the experience is simply just, to the Bible's mind, it's more than what we think. It's a living experience that may be hard on the human being, but the end of the experience is one where the individual human being has fallen in love with themselves in a way where they are now able to love and care for others in a serious way, in a beneficial way. In a serious way, in a beneficial way, meaning in a way promoting edification. Promoting edification, meaning in a way allowing the one that they are loving to realize that they themselves need to find this marriage personally. And then the trend can and will continue. So there's a lot to the process, and you go back to Peter's ladder, each rung on that ladder, an experience to go through, and you begin those first couple rungs of that ladder with a mental, psychological, an emotional, a devotional, and a philosophical experience. But as you go higher on that ladder, until you get to that final rung, you realize that all of that development, all of that intellectual, philosophical, spiritual development wasn't for us. It was for those that encounter us. whether those that encounter us are proceeding from out of our own bodies or are around us. We are to be the edifying, as the Bible says, do wherever we go. Because of the experience that we have suffered our conversation and the being of our human to go through. Just as we can praise anyone who has been married for like 2,000 years, and we are in awe of how have you done this. We see them and it's like they're like smiling as we're saying, how have you done this? But we don't really know the years that they have fought together. We don't know the years that he has walked out on her. We don't know the years that she has walked out on him. We don't know the years of them coming back together and confessing wrong to one another, holding together, all we 2,000 years later, man, and we are in awe of how they have done it. But they've gone through it. And that's the same experience that our conversations conscience and the being of our human have to go through. It's that same experience. And as I mentioned, some got asked about scars, and I went on about scars and how scars and relationships are part of growth, and how each scar is like a lesson to take in and to remember where we came from and how we got there and why we will never go back to that. Same thing is our conversation has to go through scars with the being of our human. We are really we are numbing the human experience, the way of that taking away from the experience itself. It is absolutely unjust to us. So as I'll end it here, as we go through this week, as I always say, and I always do, I will go through with you, is do all things for the sake of relationship, what it means. Consideration, not simply the other person, but also yourself. Is the relationship healthy for you? Is it healthy person? The two being together, is it healthy? And you could take that from a natural standpoint, and you could take that from a devotion. You to also do, as I am still people saying that they are tired of criticism from individuals to them because they do not feel like going to church anymore. They feel like church is this, they feel like church is that, they feel like church is depressing them, they feel like church isn't giving it up, and there's criticism for that. Well, that's an individual, and those are individuals that I'm seeing that are realizing that the marriage within is more important than the forced, promoted relationship that they have been led into. All power to such individuals. Because according to the Bible's mind, the relationship within is more important to take into consideration of, as the relationship without can get in the way of that, as we would in our natural relationship would not like another male or female interfering with the relationship we have with our male or female. It's the same thing. When our conversation knows that it is being neglected and cheated on and whatever, our conversation will cry out to us in ways that it only can to us individually. And then it's up to us to respond. So respond, and respond according to the culture of our spouse, the spirit of our mind to have.